We finally got to hear from the maniac known as Ben Herbert, and baby, could I run through a wall for that man. But what I really thought was most interesting is that he thinks he has a formula to fix the Chargers' age-old curse of getting injured all the time.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and of course, the little baby, Dylan Joan Wade. But me and David have been covering the Chargers together for 8 seasons now, and this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. And we're pushing that to the limit. One missed day with one baby. Feel pretty good about that. But to make sure that you never miss the show, because all the everydayers, we appreciate you, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, we're going to talk about Ben Herbert, the maniacal maniac that is going to motivate you to go to the gym right now. My goodness, like hearing him talk, it just almost feels inevitable that he is going to improve this Chargers football team. And of course, we got to talk about the head coach, Jim Harbaugh, and having it like to be the first day of school. And we're going to talk about Hayden Hurst and the running game and why he's very, very excited to be back in that smash mouth style of offense.
It was great hearing from these guys today. It did feel like the first day of school, the first time this team gets to get together, and they get together a little bit early since they have a new head coach. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. David, Ben Herbert is such an exciting hire, and we loved the hire when it was made and think he is going to be an X factor for this team. And it was nice hearing him talking like, when you hear him talk, you're motivated, but like it's not like a rah-rah kind of motivation. Like he's just so precise with what he says, and he's so intentional with what he's trying to do here. And to me, what stood out the most, especially as someone, you know, who's been a fan of the Chargers all my life, who's covered the Chargers for 8 seasons, is like how he expects to limit the injuries for this team. We talked about it so many times. The Chargers, even a couple years ago at the NFLPA, their training staff, all of those things, their strength and conditioning coaches, right? Some of the worst in the league, according to their own players. This is a guy, and we always hoped, if they got a new guy, right, maybe that would help decrease the injuries. Because, like, find me a team that's been more snake-bitten as consistently as the Chargers, injury luck-wise, over the past 2 decades, right? You could say maybe that the team was worse than last year. I'm talking about consistently year over year over year. Ben Herbert has a plan of attack. Ben Herbert thinks he can change that, David, and you believe him because it's very, very specific. Like he has a very specific way in which he's trying to get these players to decrease the likelihood, as he put it, of getting injured.
Yeah, I just absolutely love the mentality here. And he says, like, we want to make these players hard to break. He said, my first goal is to make you hard to break. People often say when training, we're going to break with breaking down and build you up. My goal is not to break you down. My goal is to make you harder to break. And I think, you know, you said he wants to focus on, you know, making sure that the shoulders are strong and the neck is strong. So you avoid those concussions. You want to make sure the hip flexors and the hips are strong, and the ankles and the hamstrings. All of these main parts of the body that we see repeatedly get injured year after year after year of watching the NFL football game. So this guy comes with a real pedigree. I mean, at University of Michigan, they had a roster of 145 players. They lost 2 of those players to season-ending injuries. So last year, right. So when he talks about this and he talks about this process, it's rooted in having success doing what he does and how he trains these players.
Yeah, and it was just interesting because he was so specific. He like here he says how we train the neck, how we train the shoulder girdle, how we train the hip, hamstrings, ankles. Those are the things that are very important in our training. Even like concussions, basically, is what he's saying. Like he didn't go out there and say it, and he refused to say that he could really help with injury prevention. That he would not say that, right?
Yeah.
But even with his brain, it's like, you know what protects your brain? If you have really strong neck muscles, if you have really strong shoulder muscles, and what always gets injured? It's your ankles, it's your hamstrings, it's your shoulders. Those are all things you can train. So that is what he is out there to do is, hey, I know these problem areas. this is what we're going to train in. It might seem a little unconventional, but this is how we're going to do it. And look at what my track record is, right? And for him, that's only part of his story. That's only part of his track record, because the other big thing is just Michigan, as a huge school, a team who won the national championship, was never known for the prospects and the 5-star prospects and things like that they got, right? What they're known for is the guys who went there got so much better over their time there. And part of that was the player baselines, which we're going to talk about. But this is what he also said. If you're proactive in your training to impact the neck and the flexion and extension, it's going to show up. History tells me, and I'm a data-driven, I love data, I love to make informed decisions. That is what Ben Herbert does, right? But part of that, though, is seeing where the players are at right now. And that's kind of what the process is. And when he talked about the player baselines, he said you should know how much fat mass do you have, lean mass up if you needed, fat mass down if needed. But don't step on the scale and feel any type of way when the scale, it just gives you a number. And I thought that was interesting, because we heard about what he did at Michigan, right? Where it's like he had everyone ranked against each other. So right now, what happened on the first day, April 2nd, as Jim Harbaugh kept wanting to say, right? April 2nd is when it's going down. Is ask the players what they think about themselves.
Yeah.
How strong do you think you are, right? Okay, well, you know how much you can bench, right? How much can you do this, this, and this? You probably don't know all those things. Do you think you're a special athlete here? If not, you put a question mark. So it would have been really interesting. I would love to be a fly on the wall and see how many question marks are on there. But he's starting that, David, and it's not to shame anyone, right? But it's to get that competition going, because not only are we trying for injury prevention, right, or decreasing the likelihood of injury, as Ben Herbert might murder me if I accidentally don't say that, no injury prevention, but also, where are you at right now? What do we need to improve? I'm going to find your weaknesses, and that's what your specific plan is going to help you with.
Yeah, I just love the fact that Ben Herbert is getting into a new building with new people that he's training and getting the information first. He's not making any assumptions. He is wanting to know where everyone thinks they're at, where they, where those deficiencies are, or those gaps in the knowledge base of what your body can and cannot do, so that he can get those baseline numbers and he can say, hey, this is what you need to work on. This is where I need you to be at. This is what the data says is going to help you be stronger, be faster, be more physical, be more available. All of these things, all this information is so key. Like, this is like a good manager. A good manager that steps into a new place, they take some time, they gather information, then they make necessary changes after they gather that information. And we're talking about very specific, very in-depth information on every little part of being a professional athlete. And I think just that crazy amount of concentration on trying to eliminate every single negative thing about a player, I think is really what's going to win over these players in short order.
And the interesting thing was, it wasn't about how much weight they were lifting, right? But sometimes even just where you're putting the weights back. And that was an incredible thing, is he's talking about all these players having their own specific plans and trying to work on their weaknesses. But he said part of it too, that kind of translates onto the football field, is the attention to detail of even, David, how you're putting your weights back.
That's right. He said, there's a way that we do things, and there's a way that we train. We have a 2.5 pound plates we use today. And when they put those plates back, the plates are stacked and they're about 2.5 pound plates high. And when they put them back in a certain way. I say rogue at the top of the plate. Every rogue is perfectly square. It doesn't matter if it's the second plate or the 10th plate. It goes back precisely. There's no different than a DB's eyes or his footwork, or an offensive lineman's feet or his hand placement. So he's drilling in that attention to detail in every single little thing that he does. And I also thought it was pretty funny about them talking about getting the shop vac and going and cleaning out that weight room, or that training space, as he put it. He said, hey, that training room, that place is a reflection of me and how I do things and how I want things to be done. And if I'm the arbiter of this training, then I'm going to make sure that all of this entire room is a reflection of how I do things. And that's, I think, something that's really, really good when you have somebody that's coming in to be that guy to try to get the most out of you.
Well, and I think it's just the little things that other Chargers teams of the past, and he would not bash any other Chargers teams of the past because he was asked specifically about it. But like, if he's going to tell everyone, hey, you better make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be. And that does translate, right? It's all about discipline. Yeah. That kind of discipline also counts. Hey, how many blown coverages did we see last year under Brandon Staley's defense, right?
A lot.
Do you think they had that discipline in the locker or in the weight room? I don't think they did, right? And he said, we train a certain way, but we also know how to keep the room. And it's all important, and it's all connected. And, man, I love the hiring of Ben Herbert. I do think it's going to do wonders for this team. But
love that
it wouldn't have happened without the main man in charge, who was like a kid on the first day of school, Jim Harbaugh, who actually got up in front of the class and did a little show and tell trying to run some routes. So we're going to get into what Jim Harbaugh had to say about April 2nd, the day he couldn't wait about, and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. And one of the great things about Game Time is you can just go on your phone, go on the Game Time app, and just scroll and see what's happening around you, because they have crazy, crazy deals for things even up to an hour that have already begun, right? So if you have a big concert or something, you don't really care about the openers you see there in town, you can go to that concert even an hour late and get a crazy good price on it, because you know you're getting the best price with Game Time, because you get the Game Time guarantee, which means if you find the same tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And the other great thing about it is you always know what you're paying because you get the prices up front. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, David, well, let's get into Jim Harbaugh. He is the main man. He was talking about April 2nd, even in other, his last press conference that he did. He was just like, I just can't wait to get out there. Can't wait to get out there. Can't wait to get out there. And when he did get out there, he was asked if anyone impressed him, and he said no. He said more than that. But what I do want to talk about is him talking about just his first meetings and exactly kind of what they're trying to establish, what they're actually able to learn in this early type of practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're trying to get these guys in the building. They're trying to see where they're at. They're trying to do installs. They're just trying to make sure that they get those baselines in. They're trying to meet with the defense, get those installs in, meet with the offense, get those installs in. Just get the knowledge, get the language out there so they can start ingratiating themselves into those playbooks.
Yeah, and he said, we just got right into it. Just got right into football. And that makes sense with Jim Harbaugh, right? It's like, we're not going to walk around and tell everyone to stand up and tell them something they're good at, right? We're going in and we're talking right about football. He said, putting the schemes in offensively and defensively. I also thought it was interesting, too, how excited he was about the setup. He's like, hey, the offensive guys go into the meetings at 8 o'clock, 8:15, right? They get out, they go to the weight room. The defensive guys, they're in the weight room, and then after that, they go to the meetings. And the great thing is I'm the head coach, so I get to watch all of it, right?
Yeah.
But I also thought it was interesting when he said guys were teaching the different schemes. So, hey, he brought in a bunch of former Ravens. He brought in some former Michigan players. Guys were teaching the different schemes offensively, very much a whole part whole. You're walking out of that meeting going, okay, there's a lot here. It'll really behoove you to be in these meetings, which is interesting, David, because he said he didn't know how many people were there, right? He said he wasn't keeping track. If you want to, you can go on the social media and figure out. And there people did, right? People are, we know who was there at least somewhat. Elohi Gilman, the Derwin James, Justin Herbert, right? But it also seems like there was a little kind of tinge, David, of like, it's kind of like math class, right? And I learned this the hard way in college myself. Like, I thought like in high school, I can miss classes, come back, ace tests.
Yeah.
Then I started getting college math classes, and like you missed one class, you came back, you're totally lost. So
yeah.
I did think there was, hey, this is voluntary. We're saying it's voluntary. I have to tell you it's voluntary. But the guys who are missing this are missing out on some important stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely made it seem that way. It's kind of like you don't really have to be here, but you better be here, and you should be here. It's just one of those things you have to kind of read in between.
I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed. Right. You're going to be a little bit behind.
Exactly. Yeah, he's definitely looking down the rim of his glasses at you for sure. But I also like the fact that he said, hey, we're also going to utilize technology and meet the players where they are. So yeah, I felt like that was really cool as well. It's just like, hey, I understand, it is voluntary. They don't have to be here. But there is some homework that's going to be done. But also we're going to do our best to try to meet the players where they are, get them those playbooks so that they can get their nose in the book and they can feel good and ready to go whenever they do make it into the building.
But if you do that, though, you're not going to get to see Jim Harbaugh in front of the class showing, players where their hand placement should be if they're an offensive lineman. And also, according to Hayden Hurst, getting up and actually running routes in front of the team, which I would have paid to see. And he was asked, hey, how did Coach do out there? Fluid. He was up there running some fluid routes in front of it. That's great.
Friendly to the quarterback, yeah.
I also loved what he had to say about Ben Herbert, just because we know how tight these guys are. We know how important it was for Jim Harbaugh to bring on Ben Herbert. And Ben Herbert said, hey, it took me 30 seconds of talking to Jim Harbaugh before I was decided. I had to talk to the family, but I was decided.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting. First of all, he said fat is the enemy of speed, which is just chef's kiss of Harbaughisms, right? It's like that. Something probably Ben Herbert wouldn't say. He'd say it in probably a smarter way, right? But that's how Jim Harbaugh sees it.
No
and he also
doubt.
said, there's nobody that combines cutting-edge scientific with the old-school discipline, strength, and conditioning coach like he does. He's the best I've ever seen or been around as a player or as a coach, which shows you, David, exactly why he was so intent on bringing him and exactly why the Chargers are so lucky to have gotten his services.
I mean, just look at the combine. Look at the draft this year. Like, there is 18 Michigan players that were at the draft combine.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's by no mistake. Okay, that is definitely because of how that training program went and because of the guy that was leading that training program. Why do you think he was one of the first hires that Jim Harbaugh made to make sure that he got him on that staff? He's like, hey, I know I got you that $1 million contract. I'm definitely going to get you more than that, and you're going to continue to work with me. And Ben Herbert basically said that was one of the easiest decisions of my life. I mean, we had a 5 to 7 minute conversation about the contract details with the wife, and that was pretty much it. I mean, my mind was made up. That was an easy decision. This is just a working relationship where he knows exactly what coach is going to do, who he's going to be every single day, and vice versa. So they know that this works. They have the track record of success to be able to fall back on that as well.
Yeah, and he was also talking about Ben Herbert, and as far as like what is Ben Herbert trying to do, what is he trying to get as far as the baselines for the players? And he said, what's your neck strength, flexion, extension, like things nobody thinks about with neck strength, right? Neck workouts. Do you want a steel rod in your neck, or do you want a noodle? A piece of advice, you want that steel rod, a trunk where the roots go into the traps. He also said that shoulders are lean muscle, a gold mine of lean muscle mass. The back is the lean mass of whatever. But it was just really interesting to hear him say that. And he also talked about this, right? It doesn't completely make you immune from concussions, but you sure would rather have the steel rod than the noodle, which is a total Jim Harbaugh way of talking about Ben Herbert. But he also, David, real quick, we'll talk about one of the most recent signings. He actually got asked about Christian Fulton, and I thought it was interesting what he had to say about his newest corner.
Yeah, he said it's a starter level corner in this league. Excited to get him with Ben Herbert and address some of the soft tissue stuff. He has played at a high level, played at a starter caliber level, good football player in a position of need. I think that's all very succinct and very concise. And I think he sees that there's some potential there with Christian Fulton, but he has dealt with some injuries, and he feels like Ben Herbert is just the man to be able to address those injuries so he can get on the field and make some money for his next contract.
Absolutely. We know he picked the Chargers for a reason, just like the Chargers picked him. And Christian Fulton has been bad. He was bad last year.
Yeah.
But what you're hearing from Jim Harbaugh right there, because he says, hey, a starter level corner in this league, he wasn't that last year. He was far below that last year.
Yeah.
But what he's telling you is it's because he didn't have Ben Herbert, right? And that's what they're banking on with this Christian Fulton signing. And, of course, he's going to say nice things about a guy who just came in.
Of course.
But at the same time, he's saying, hey, part of the reason he was so bad is he was trying to play through a lot of soft tissue things, and it really affected his performance. So that is why they can get this guy that other teams didn't want, because they see a bad PFF grade or whatever, and he believes that he has the coaching staff, right, to get it done, because Ben Herbert will help this guy return to the form we saw in 2021. And if the Chargers get that version of Christian Fulton for the price they got him from in 2024, that is, magic all the way down from Ortiz, from Jim Harbaugh to Ben Herbert. That's how you make a signing like that, which looks like it's a bad signing if you're just looking at it in a vacuum. And you can justify, we can make this dude better, and we're going to get a starter level corner here for a bargain discount. But we also got to hear from Hayden Hurst for the first time, really. And he opened up about Greg Roman's offense, which he said is going to be a lot of different things. But the one thing he was most confident it's going to be It's a hell of a run game. So we're talking about why he said it's kind of like the 2019 Ravens offense and getting shades from that, but then immediately backtracked it and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about FanDuel because right now we're in the quadfecta. The sports calendar is loaded and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action because not only do you have the biggest college basketball tournament going on right now, and that is extremely heating up, and there's still more games that you can bet on, but you have baseball in full swing. You have NBA heading to the playoffs with teams like the Los Angeles Lakers clinging on to a playoff spot. The playoffs are pretty much already happening in the NBA. And then you have the NHL playoffs, which for my money are the best playoffs out there. Physical, going to game 7, crazy games, one of the most fun things to bet on. But if you're going to be betting in the best time of the year to bet on sports, you do it with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Just don't bet on the Padres because they're letting me down so far this season. But all you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, let's talk about Hayden Hurst, who, I guess, a polarizing signing in the sense of kind of like Christian Fulton coming off of a terrible season for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
Scary reasons even. And we'll talk about why he's so confident and why he's not concerned about getting amnesia from a concussion, basically, right? But one of the things I was most interested to hear about was what he found about Greg Roman's vision for this offense. Before I tell you guys that, make sure you're going and checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel where you get local experts like us and giving you expert analysis by people that cover their team in their local market every single day. So make sure to check out the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. But Hayden Hurst was talking about Greg Roman's vision for this offense because they had a lot of questions with him. And it's good to know because he was in Greg Roman's offense. And I think a lot of people, David, are afraid that it's going to be the Chargers running the ball 60 times and Justin Herbert's not going to throw it, right? So this, I don't think, made anyone feel any better when he said it's a lot of broad strokes from the Baltimore days, 2018, 2019 when I was there. Very, very run-heavy teams. Very good Baltimore teams, right? 2018, though, beat the Chargers in regular season, kind of fell apart in the playoffs. But that was when Lamar Jackson, was winning his first MVP, but wasn't nearly the passer that Justin Herbert is now, right? So I thought it was very interesting. He kind of backed off of that really quickly when he said, I'm sure it's evolved since 2018, 2019, and he's put different spins on it. Obviously, the passing game is probably a little bit more advanced, but I know that run game to my core, and it's going to be fun to watch. So, David, what we're hoping for, right? Yeah. A more modern version of a passing attack that's fit around Justin Herbert and his talents. But nobody's confused about how good this running game is going to be.
Not at all. I mean, and this is something we've been hearing from the very, very beginning, from when Jim Harbaugh got hired, when Greg Roman got hired. Everybody is saying all the exact same things. We are going to run the ball at a high level. We are going to give Justin Herbert a good running game. We are going to fight teams. We are going to out physical teams. We are going to beat teams up. Like, they are going to know they were in a knockdown, drag out fight with the Chargers every single time we play them. We want to drag them into the deep water, and we want to drag them under and absolutely drown them with the running game.
But how do you do it, right? Because you can say it, but how do you do it? And he was asked how they can build this good running game. And what he said is you have to be solid up front. You have to have smart guys all across the board. Tight ends, offensive linemen, running backs. Side note, I would throw receivers in there as well.
Yeah.
But another thing he said, David, is that the teams he's been on that have run the ball the best are the teams that are most connected, the most close locker rooms, the closest teams together. And I think that's very symbolic because the running game, it only takes one guy to mess up to take a potentially 80-yard run and turn it into a 2-yard loss. And part of the reason the Chargers were so bad in the running game last year was not because they just, had a poor run blocking offensive line, but they had the worst set of run blocking tight ends in the NFL. And now they have two, Will Dissly. Hayden Hurst has been average for most of his career run blocking. And Ben Mason, who we'll talk about tomorrow, halfback / tight end, who I guarantee is going to be out there as not only a fullback / tight end, a fullback, but also a blocking tight end as well. But it was interesting hearing how he thinks, David, they're going to build this good run game because it's not, you can't just say it. You need action as well.
Yeah, he says when you have a system like this where you go get buy-in and collectively fight for one another, and you turn into a street fight like what we did in Baltimore, it's just going out there and out tough people because nobody wants to do that for 60 minutes. It's a tough game, and it's tough doing that 20 weeks for 60 minutes. I think these coaches, players, John, and playing for Jim, they expect to wear teams out at the end. If you're not going to do it, then they're going to go find somebody that is going to do it. And I think that was definitely very important to hear, because I think we've seen in the past sometimes the best players haven't really been playing on the field, like that have been actually getting the results that are needed, that are desired, that are required to be able to win at this level. And I think, with Hayden Hurst saying that and knowing Jim Harbaugh and who he is, the best players are going to play, and they're going to be the players that are going to go out there and play out the vision that Jim Harbaugh has.
And I think what he's also saying there is it's not just Ben Herbert, right, and how strong he can make you. It's not just Greg Roman and him having a really, really good rushing scheme. You got to have that dog in you, and not everyone does, right? And I think that's what he's saying there. And some of these guys aren't going to make it, right?
Yeah.
Some of these guys aren't going to be cut out for Jim Harbaugh. Some guys, right, he talked about why Greg Roman's running scheme works, right? Talked about how to build it, also talked about why it works, right?
Yeah.
It's a tough game, tough doing that 20 weeks at 60 minutes, like we're talking about, right? That's so true, especially when you get late in the season, especially when you get late in a game, the fourth quarter, January football, playoff football. Teams don't want to play Jim Harbaugh, but you have to have the right players. So you have to get the coaches, you have to get the coaching staff that can actually maximize physically what these players can do. But more than anything, you have to find the right type of players. Which
I love his mentality too, Daniel.
I think that's just why you've seen them go out and get so many Ravens, so many Michigan players, so many guys like that, because not everyone has that dog in them. And that's just the plain fact of the matter.
Yeah, it is. I love his mentality because he's like, hey, I don't know if everybody can do that for 60 minutes. I can, though. I know I can. I know I can go out there and I can give it for 60 minutes, but I don't know if the guy in front of me can do the same.
Exactly. And I also was very interested to hear what he said, because one of the things that really concerned me the most about the signing, even though it's a 1-year deal or, short-term deal where you're not investing a ton in it, right?
Right.
Was him in the concussion issues, because this is a dude who, at least, from one side of doctors, probably was getting told to not play football anymore, right? Ended up, getting a second opinion. But I thought it was very interesting after he was getting basically amnesia because of concussions last year for the Carolina Panthers. He isn't as concerned about, him being able to keep playing football and keep playing football at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, he just provided some information that we're not always privy to, and I think it's important context. He says, as far as are you worried about an injury, he says, not at all. Last year I had a concussion for a week after. It was a little touch and go stuff, but I went to the Mayo Clinic down in Jacksonville and got a second opinion and got a full, clear bill of health. The only reason that I really sat out as long as I did was really from the front office. There was really no point. We were 2-13 at the time, so there's really no point in rushing back, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, what's the whole point of going out there? It's kind of like the same thing that happened with Keenan Allen towards the end of last season. Could he have come back if the Chargers were in contention?
Yeah.
Yes. He even said that I would definitely have been out there. I would have been playing, but that wasn't the case. The season was already over. Why am I going to go out there and risk getting seriously injured when there really is no point?
Yeah, no, exactly. And the other thing is just head injuries are scary, right? So when you see someone, because you don't always see the full effects of it, right? You see concussion, maybe he's out 2 weeks, maybe he's out 6 weeks, but you never hear about like all the side effects that come along with it. I appreciate Joey Bosa a couple years ago, right? Talked about it when he had a couple of concussions. Yeah, and I mean, Asante Samuel Jr. totally changed his rookie season, the concussions. Yeah, but Joey Bosa just being, hey, I basically just wanted to sit in a dark room all day. Like, how scary is it when your brain can't remember things?
Yeah.
Under the age of 30? At the age of 29, 30? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's crazy. But I think it shows you how much this dude loves football, right? And that's really kind of what the way I took it. Mm-hmm. And why I think the Chargers felt comfortable bringing in a guy that has something as scary as that, right? Hayden Hurst, I mean, you talked about his tattoo that says dog eat dog, right? Because he said, hey, it's me against you, mano a mano. We'll let the cards lie where they do.
Yeah.
But I like my chances. It's like, we're talking about the guy that had the worst Pro Football Focus run blocking grade last year. I think last year was a one-off for Hayden Hurst. If he can stay healthy this year, And I think the Chargers are hoping that Ben Herbert can help him do that because he didn't even have Ben Herbert when he was in Baltimore, right? Ben Herbert was in college football. So I think they're hoping that with Ben Herbert, because, I mean, Hayden Hurst has gotten injured a bunch of times. It's not just the head injury, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They're hoping they can get more out of him, and they're trying to bet on him, Bradley Bozeman, two guys coming from an insanely terrible situation in Carolina and saying they can play better with us. We have guys here that have the relationships with them to get more out of them than we saw last year. So I think
how amazing does that staff look, Daniel, if they're able to take all these players and be able to get the most out of them and turn those one-year prove-it deals into maybe longer contracts?
Well, they have to, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to be competitive, that they're going to be a winning football team in 2024, they have to. But I think that's why you can reason with yourself and actually kind of justify taking some of the guys that they've taken, because a lot of these guys didn't have good years last year, and they're hoping on a lot of bounce backs. But you're starting to peel back the onion a little bit about why they feel like those guys can have bounce back seasons with the Chargers and why they were potentially worse in much worse situations, like Carolina last year is a great example of that. But that's going to wrap it up for today's show. The good news is we have some rumors floating around and also an official visit for Malik Neighbors with the Chargers. The Chargers potentially interested in Tyler Boyd, and the Chargers adding Ben Mason, who we wanted them to add forever ago, David, coming out of Michigan. He's back with the Chargers as a fullback tight end kind of hybrid. I'm excited about that addition, more than I think most people should be about additions of fullbacks that got cut from their previous team. So can't wait to get into that with you guys. Also, thanks for dealing with me on 10 hours of sleep probably the last 4 nights. And a special shout out to my wife, who is just absolutely incredible. Karina, thank you so much for delivering Dylan Joan Wade into the world. And thank you to all the fans who hit me up and sent me nice messages and just made me feel really good, because I haven't got a lot of sleep, and those have kept me going over the last few days. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to Dylan for making a little special appearance on today's show. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow by subscribing and following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as following us on all social media, because we post it every day to every part of our socials. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC, me at Dan Talk Sports, and Dave Drugmeyer at Dro Talk SD, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So maybe we'll get some more interviews tomorrow, press conferences. We'll see what we get out of tomorrow, but we do have some news with Malik Neighbors, Tyler Boyd, Ben Mason, which we're excited about. So make sure you guys are back here with us for that. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.